Endeavor Horizons of the Infinite. Endeavor to Save the World, Part 3. By Elton Garr. Tabitha wasn't sure how much longer that Captain Watt and the Starship Endeavor could put off the inevitable. The Endeavor had been orbiting Metachen for almost a month. That would have been a long time for first contact if they were alone. But they weren't. 3 Asteron Dynamics ships had began to set up a permanent base on one of the other planets in the Metachen system and taken over the trade negotiations. She understood why the captain hadn't ordered them to leave. She felt sympathy for the Metachen too, and having Asteron put them into indentured servitude or worse was a worst-case scenario. It wasn't even because she worked for a different corporation. Helix and Asteron were in almost entirely different markets, so rarely came into conflict. But the Endeavor couldn't stop it. If Adrian ordered an attack on the Asteron Dynamic ships, the Endeavor's failsafe would kick in and the ship would shut down. Her best guess was that he didn't want to admit that. So she would help. A few months ago, she would have done it in front of the entire crew. But while she still thought she should have been put in command, she didn't see any value in undermining him, especially since he gave her more influence than any other captain would give a first officer. So she stepped into his office, glanced around and asked,
"Are we alone?"
Adrian glanced at the wall for a second, and then said,
"As much as I ever am."
Tabitha thought she understood. There was a Nexa liaison somewhere on the ship, and anyone good enough to get that job would bug the captain's office, but he had never seemed to care before.
"Either way, it's time for us to leave,"
Tabitha said.
"Have a seat."
"Why are we still here, Adrian?"
Tabitha asked as she sat, careful not to use his title because she wanted to make the question less formal.
"Because the Metachans haven't given up yet,"
Adrian said.
"And Asteron Dynamics is so unimpressed their carrier doesn't even have their defense drones launched. If there was anything the Metashan could do, they would have done it. There are other people we could help,"
Tabitha said. The captain leaned back and asked,
"How much do you know about Nexa?"
"Enough to know they won't waste their influence, saving a world no one knew existed a few weeks ago."
That's what their liaison said. But they implied they would include it in their plans from now on.
The captain said, confirming that he had learned who the liaison was.
"So in 10 years, something will happen that undermines Asteron Dynamics, and we won't even know if Nexa did it. But that doesn't tell me why we're still here,"
Tabitha said.
Because that same person is searching for an answer to one of Nexa's biggest secrets.
The captain said.
"And what will that do for the people of Meteshan?"
Tabitha asked.
That's complicated. It could either save their entire civilization, or make them even more of a target.
The captain said. Nexa was very good at finding secrets. Most of them were the individual secrets that got you power and influence. But there were others that changed the way you saw the universe. Edric was among the best at finding those secrets. He had spent almost 50 years uncovering secrets and changing things in ways that no one would ever know. And none of the secrets he had ever found were anywhere as important as the one he hoped to find on Metachen. It was the same secret that had inspired the founders of Nexa to create their empire of secrets. And while he had told the captain some of what he hoped to find, he had kept most of it back. The people who had left their message behind had wanted humanity to advance quickly. They had included clues to ideas and technologies that Nexa was still uncovering. But part of the reason they were still uncovering them was that they had been left on Earth, and so most of what they had left behind had been destroyed in wars or natural disasters. That was why the Metachans were so vital. They had wars. Every intelligent species tested their strength against their neighbors eventually, but they had been small, isolated wars, and more importantly, their love of art had meant they avoided fighting at the places the secrets were most likely hidden. And they would have continued to insist those sacred sites stay protected if Asteron dynamics hadn't made the Medichen desperate. But even with Asteron threatening to enslave their entire world, he had only convinced 2 teenage boys and 1 archaeologist to help him get in.
We shouldn't be here,
Hedina said, as the small device he had attached to the massive stone slab worked its way around, cutting it free and hopefully revealing a room that had been sealed in stone for tens of thousands of years.
They left it here for you to find,
Edric said, glancing at the 2 boys. They were young enough, they might not receive the full punishment if they were found. But he had doubts. People were less forgiving when it came to sacred places. The stone door slid and began to tip over, but he had attached 2 more devices near the top that allowed it to fall slowly and mostly silently. If they had time, he would have waited days to let the air clear. But the longer they waited, the more likely they were going to be caught. So he put a filter into his nose that might protect him and stepped in. He didn't know what to expect. He wasn't high enough in Nexa to have heard the full story of the discovery of the secret. He didn't even know where on Earth it had been discovered, though he had theories. What he hadn't expected was what he probably should have. A room that looked more like a well-sealed laboratory than a tomb. The stone was only the first layer of defense. A massive wall that had survived for millennia. It was also what had made this place into a massive work of art that the Medichen treated as sacred. But only a couple feet in were plastic seals that had kept the room a vacuum so that the machines and tools left behind hadn't faced the terrors of dust and water.
it's some type of trick.
Hedina said, her voice filled with both awe and terror. She had spent her life looking at the history of her people, but had clearly never seen anything like this.
If it is, it's a trick that's going to save your world,
Edric said, his eyes moving past the many tools and useful objects in the room to the book near the center. It was covered with even more plastic to isolate it, even from the clean room that had protected everything else.
What do we do?
One of the teen boys said.
We secure the area, and hope they include ideas on how to win a hopeless war,
Edric said, his mind going not to the war that the Medichen were about to fight, but the galactic war that the species that had made this had died in.
What does it say?
Adrian asked, and Edric wondered if the captain knew that the conversation was encrypted in ways only Nexa could decipher, and if the captain had the good sense to be alone for this conversation.
I haven't had time to even explore the things that aren't sealed away. But I can see enough to know it's in a unique language from the other one,
Edric said. He hated dealing with amateurs, and as much as he respected the captain, he half expected him to confirm that he meant Nexa's secret.
I can give you another day or 2, but even Lumina is asking why we're still here. We need to either get the location of our salvation or go someplace else. Do you need any assistance?
This place is far more intact than I expected. I'd like to keep it that way. And Asteron tends to break things it doesn't understand, so keeping it in Meteshan hands is vital. Besides, there is no one on the Endeavor I trust to leave once they have access to this,
Edric said. As he spoke, a security drone he had left outside began to buzz. Someone was coming.
On the other hand, I may need your assistance in avoiding being executed for damaging a holy site,
Edric said, as he moved out of the direct line of the door. He didn't think the Medichen would shoot someone before they could speak, but this was a serious crime.
Care to explain?
The captain asked.
They're very serious about cultural artifacts,
Edric said, and shoved the communicator into his pocket. A few seconds later, a dozen Medichen rushed in. But they didn't have guns. They had long, thin clubs with hand-carved patterns along their length that were as artistic as most other tools that the Medichen used. Since they weren't going to kill him, he took his hand off his own weapon. He hated using it. It was built into the lining of his suit, and every time he fired it, he had to repair the suit, and it was hard to explain why your clothes had hidden weapons without looking suspicious. The soldiers seemed too shocked to act, but they were blocking the only entrance, so there wasn't much they had to do. Edric simply said.
I have discovered the source of your salvation.
He hoped that salvation translated well, but it was hard to tell. The confusion on their faces was either the wrong word, or they had just walked into a massive storage room full of weird and ancient technology.
You've been spying on us?
A guard said, and Edric couldn't help but laugh. Mostly because this was the first time he had been accused of spying when it wasn't true.
This isn't human technology. It's something far older left for you to find. I can honestly say I'm not spying on your people.
He had dropped several of the small replicating probes that Nexa put everywhere, and with the amount of Tentium on the planet, they would be far better at scanning, but there weren't enough to actually start spying yet, and it would take months or years for there to be enough to truly be useful. The guard looked at the others, then took a breath and said,
This place is sacred.
I agree entirely, and keeping it that way will help you protect it. But to hide something sacred is as bad as to desecrate it, or do you disagree?
He knew the answer. Their culture found the idea of someone hoarding or locking away a piece of art almost as bad as destroying it. You could own a piece of art, but you were expected to display it. That might be in your private residence, or in a business, or even a government building. That was why most of the shops looked like a museum.
This is not my decision,
the soldier said. That wasn't surprising. Soldiers were generally lower in their society than most, since their society believed both in individual choices and creation over destruction. It wouldn't survive contact with the rest of the universe, but for now he could use it.
I suggest you bring in scientists, inventors, and linguists,
he said, and he sat on one of the stone chairs that had been in this room since before humans founded their first city. Over the week since the Medichen discovered the secret cache of technology and knowledge, they had only had one meeting with Adrian and stopped trading entirely. If he hadn't known why, Adrian would have decided that the mission was over and left. But Edric had assured him that there was still something worthwhile. So he had burned what little political capital he had to buy Edric extra days to collect what might be the key to escaping from the Nexari. While the captain was eating lunch with Tabitha during the shift changes, Edric called. Almost without thinking about it, he glanced at the wall where Edric had returned the spy device. He didn't like being spied on, but Edric made a good point that knowing it was there was better than not.
I assume you know we're both here,
Tabitha said. Adrian hadn't told her who the Nexa spy was, but as a former Helix spy, she was better at this type of game, and it seemed clear from the hints Edric wanted Tabitha to figure out who he was.
I couldn't help but notice that you were,
he said, and the captain wondered how he had missed the clues for so long.
Is there a reason for the interruption?
Adrian asked.
The Medichens are remarkable linguists. It turns out if you treat translation as a work of art instead of a science, you can make leaps in logic no computer could.
Then they have translated the message left by their benefactors?
Adrian asked.
Barely at all, though with every new word they make the next one easier. They'll have a working language in months,
Edric said.
Which is good for them, but months longer than we can wait,
Adrian said.
They haven't fully translated it. But they know the word for off and on. And one of them is about to push the on button. I'm not entirely certain what is going to happen, but everything we know suggests it was made to help them fight a war against the Nexari.
Tabitha stood, and as she walked onto the bridge said,
Get us some distance from that planet and power down the weapons. I don't want any signs of aggression.
Is there anything else?
Adrian asked.
The Medichen leadership said that the Endeavor is welcome back eventually. For now, they have given me an hour to have someone come and pick me up.
I'll send Regan,
the captain said, and after giving the order to the pilot, he reached across the table and pulled Tabitha's meal over, dumping the rest of it onto his plate. He had an hour, and him lurking around the bridge would just make everyone uncomfortable. Tabitha couldn't help but be impressed by the Medichen restraint. They had delayed turning on a device that they hoped would protect their entire world for an hour so a single person could get off the planet. She was also impressed that a species who had barely reached orbit was able to know exactly how long it would take for the shuttle to reach the Endeavor. Though she might blame Regan for that, she couldn't help talking about the shuttles, including that she could reach the Endeavor in less than 5 minutes. Tabitha saw the power spike on the planet within seconds of the shuttle docking. Even more impressive was that it took only 2.5 minutes for her to see 6 streaks of light appear. Whatever it was moving twice as fast as the Endeavor's shuttles, and those were among the most advanced built by the Commonwealth. The Asteron Dynamics carrier was still in orbit, and it began to launch drones as soon as it saw something was coming from the planet. The unmanned drones were primarily defensive.
Zoom in on that ship,
Tabitha said, and the screen changed. She saw 5 of the 6 fighters approaching the carrier. As they zoomed in, she saw they were odd beyond just being advanced. The most notable oddity was that each was a unique design, and they were covered in art similar to everything on Metachen.
That isn't possible. They haven't had time to build a ship, let alone something like that,
the captain said from behind her. It was the same thing that Tabitha was thinking. The Metachen's way of doing things was flexible and resilient, but it wasn't designed to be fast.
Perhaps they've been lying to us,
Mick said. Mick assumed everyone had ulterior motives. That was what made him a good security officer, and Tabitha tried to put it together. Was it possible that the reason that the Metachen had created a peaceful and open society with almost no wars was because they had much longer to do it? But if that was the case, why hadn't they revealed it 2 weeks ago when Asteron showed up?
No. This is something else,
Adrian said, but he didn't give any orders. He almost never came onto the bridge during Tabitha's shifts, but when he did, he never took command unless she suggested he should. Before the conversation could continue, the battle began. Though calling it a battle was a stretch. The drones were fast. Without a pilot, they pushed themselves well past human limits. The Metachen fighters were faster, and the range and targeting arch of their weapons was impressive as they destroyed the first wave of drones in the seconds before the next wave was launched. That one collapsed even faster. And as it did, a single ship that hadn't joined the fight flew towards the Endeavor. The energy shields went up, but Tabitha said,
let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Nothing we've seen from the Meteshan suggests they'll attack us without warning.
assuming that they're in control of those weapons.
Mick said.
If that thing can do significant damage to the Endeavor before we can raise shields, it won't matter if we raise them,
The captain said, but he still didn't give any orders. The thing stopped in front of the Endeavor, and Tabitha saw it clearly for the first time. It looked like something that the Metachen might make, but far more advanced. Not just because it was covered in art, but because each piece looked handmade.
We're being hailed.
Mick said.
Send it through.
Is this the Endeavor?
A voice said, and the captain recognized it as the man he had spent the last month having meetings with almost every day. The Metachen politician who had been put in charge of the world's defense.
It is, and we're very confused.
Tabitha said.
The predecessors left us a handful of ships, along with instructions on how to build more. With what you've taught us, we should be able to make something that can go anywhere in our solar system in less than a year.
And until then you have 6 ships. But why do they look like something your people made?
There was a chuckle, and he said,
The Tentinum you told us about was not here randomly. It seems that something has been watching our people. It has designed ships in our style. They adapt to the pilot, and since no two people are alike, no two ships will be alike. But it is time for us to ask you to leave.
We have been here longer than we intended.
Tabitha said, though she was glad that they had, and not just because it was good for Helix. But she was disappointed for the captain. She knew he had hoped to find clues that could help the Commonwealth in the message from the predecessors.
And we owe you more than what we have given you? So I am transmitting a copy of the message left behind. It does not have the technological information, but we hope it will help you find what your spirit keeper is looking for.
We thank you,
Tabitha said, and the ship turned and flew towards the carrier, which had run out of drones. And over the next few minutes, the handful of fighters were disabled as well, though they hadn't been destroyed, so the pilots should be safe. That was more restraint than she would have shown. There was a moment of silence, and then the captain said,
Commander, it's time for us to leave.